The Seattle Seahawks are starting to look like a team the league simply is not ready for, and the Titans game exposed it in a way nobody expected. The score said 30-24, but the real story was how easily Seattle took control whenever they felt like it. It never looked like danger, never felt like panic, and that is the part that should worry the rest of the NFC. One moment the Titans were dragging the clock, the next moment the Seahawks were striking in seconds with a deep shot to Jaxon Smith-Njigba that changed the entire tone of the night. It felt like a team that knows it has too many answers for whatever comes at them. What nobody is talking about is how many layers this team has built at the same time. You have Sam Darnold settling after a rough week, trusting his reads and leaning on the one player who never lets him down. You have Kenneth Walker and Zach Charbonnet turning short gains into long drives, keeping the pressure constant and punishing defenses every time they try to load up on the pass. And then there is the defense, full of players stepping into bigger roles than expected, from Drake Thomas to Patrick O'Connell, refusing to let Tennessee find any rhythm. Even Cam Ward, the Titans rookie, played hard and kept the game close, but Seattle still controlled every important moment. The shocking part is that this was not even Seattle at full strength. Injuries, long travel, and a tough divisional fight the week before should have slowed them down, but it only exposed how deep this roster has become under Mike Macdonald. If this is what they look like on an off night, you can imagine what happens once the red zone mistakes and small details get cleaned up. And that is where things get even more interesting, because the entire story flips once you understand how dangerous this team becomes when you look at their last opponent and the emotional beating they carried into Tennessee. But before we get into that, hit that like and subscribe button for more Seahawks and all the NFL content. Let's aim for 300 likes on this video. The Seattle Seahawks walked into Tennessee carrying more than just game plans. They carried the bruises from a brutal week against the Los Angeles Rams, where Sam Darnold threw 4 interceptions and every hit felt heavier than the last whistle. That kind of divisional war usually leaves a team slow, flat, and searching for energy, especially after flying across the country straight into another physical matchup. Tennessee opened with a grinding drive of nearly 8 minutes, stealing the clock and trying to drag Seattle into a slow, ugly fight where every mistake would hurt. Most teams fade in that spot, but Seattle treated it like a stress test, not a trap. What made this game strange is how different the rhythm looked compared to the final scoreline. The Titans held the ball for most of the night, yet the Seahawks still dropped 30 points while having the ball for only about 22 minutes, which is ridiculous production in such limited time. Long stretches of defense, false starts that killed early momentum, and a feeling that the offense kept putting on the brakes inside the red zone turned what should have been a runaway into a thriller. Jason Myers kept saving drives with field goals instead of extra points, and every time it felt like Seattle was ready to slam the door, a penalty or a misfire brought Tennessee right back into the conversation. It was not clean, but it showed how high the floor is for this group when the ceiling has not even been touched. And through all of that chaos, one thing kept cutting through the noise: the explosive connection between Sam Darnold and Jaxon Smith that kept bailing Seattle out of tight spots. The Titans tried to control pace, tried to drag the game deep into the fourth quarter, and yet every time they relaxed for 1 second, 11 made them pay. The crazy part is that this was not some one-time outburst. This is becoming normal for him. So if the story so far is about survival and resilience, the next part of this breakdown flips the focus to pure dominance. Because once you look at what Jaxon Smith-Njigba is doing this season, the word normal does not even come close. The Seattle Seahawks might quietly have the most unfair weapon in the league right now, and it is not a quarterback, it is Jaxon Smith. His night against Tennessee looked like something out of a video game. Deep shots, sideline grabs, and drive killers for the Titans every time they thought they were safe. 8 catches and well over 160 yards with 2 touchdowns is crazy by itself, but it hits different when you realize he is stacking games like this one after another. He already has more than 1,300 yards on the season. He just passed DK Metcalf for the franchise single-season record, and there are still weeks left on the schedule. For most receivers, one huge game is a headline. For Jaxon Smith-Njigba, it is starting to feel like the standard. What makes him such a problem is not just the numbers, it is the way he bends a defense before the ball is even snapped. Corners try to press him and he shakes free, safeties shade to his side and he still finds space, linebackers drop underneath and he snaps off routes in front of them before they can even turn. Short throws turn into chunk gains, deep routes flip field position in one play, and every third down becomes a moment where the other team is thinking, please, anyone but 11. When coverage tilts toward him, lanes open for Cooper Kupp, tight end A.J. Barner, and for Rashid Shaheed when he releases down the field. Even the run game feels different, because safeties are scared to crash the box when one misstep against Jaxon Smith, 40-yard walk to the end zone. The craziest part is that this level of impact is now starting to reach award territory, not just highlight territory. If he keeps this pace and finishes near 2,000 yards, you are not only talking about Offensive Player of the Year talk, you are talking about real most valuable player talk for a wide receiver on a team fighting for the top of the NFC. Every time Sam Darnold drops back, he knows there is at least one throw on the field that can save a drive, calm a stadium, or break a defense in half. And most quarterbacks never get that luxury. That trust changes how a passer plays, how an offense is called, and how bold you can be in big moments. And that is exactly where this story goes next, because the next piece in this puzzle is how Sam Darnold is learning to run this passing attack around the superstar he has in number 11. The Seattle Seahawks were supposed to have a quarterback problem, but Sam Darnold is quietly turning that story on its head. One week he is getting ripped for a nightmare game against the Rams. The next week he walks into Tennessee, shrugs off all the noise, and runs the offense like a calm veteran. No panic, no hero ball, just smart football. He finished this one with a clean line. 16 of 24 passes, around 244 yards, 2 touchdowns, 0 interceptions, and that is exactly what this team needs from him. Not a weekly highlight machine, just a steady driver who keeps the car on the road while the weapons take over. The twist is how different Sam Darnold looks when he plays inside his lane instead of chasing big plays on every snap. In the Clint Kubiak system, his job is simple on paper but hard in real life. Find the open man quickly, trust timing, and let players like Jaxon Smith-Njigba and Cooper Kupp do the heavy lifting after the catch. There were a couple of throws that could have turned into mistakes, and there was one ugly moment where he got hit as he tried to throw, but he kept his cool and never let the game tilt. He used the short game when the Titans backed off, hit deep shots when they tried to crowd the box, and kept the pocket moving just enough to stay out of trouble. You could see the confidence grow every time he went right back to number 11 and moved the chains again. What nobody is really saying is how much this version of Sam Darnold unlocks the rest of the playbook. When your quarterback is not forcing passes or giving the ball away, you can lean harder into the parts of this roster that scare defenses the most. Safeties have to respect the deep ball to Jaxon Smith-Njigba and the speed of Rashid Shaheed. Corners cannot leave Cooper Kupp alone underneath, and that spreads the field in a way that defenses hate. Once that happens, the next logical step is simple. You start pounding on tired fronts with Kenneth Walker and Zach Charbonnet until they break. And that is where all of this becomes dangerous for the rest of the league, because the ground attack is starting to look like the finishing move in a fight that defenses already struggle to survive. The Seattle Seahawks look completely different once they start running the ball with intent, and the Titans game was a perfect example of that shift. On a night where the clock kept leaning toward Tennessee, Seattle still punched out around 114 rushing yards at roughly 5.7 yards per carry, which is brutal efficiency for a team that did not even control time of possession. Every time the drive seemed to stall, a handoff to Kenneth Walker or Zach Charbonnet snapped the offense back to life and pushed the Titans' front backward. It did not feel like flashy football, it felt like slow damage, one carry at a time, until the defenders started grabbing at jerseys instead of wrapping up. What makes this backfield scary is how perfectly the two styles fit together. Kenneth Walker is the one who takes a simple run call and turns it into a chunk gain, bouncing outside, cutting back, and forcing safeties to make tackles they do not want to make. He had only 11 carries in this game, but still rolled up around 71 yards, which tells you how explosive each touch was instead of just how many times he got the ball. Zach Charbonnet brings the steady thump, finishing runs through contact, pushing piles, and turning short yard situations into easy conversions, plus a strong touchdown that reminded everyone he is more than just a role player. Even with his workload trimmed, he answered with about 5.8 yards per carry, which is the exact mindset this staff needs from him. Stay ready and punish defenses whenever his number gets called. The important part is what this kind of rushing attack means for the bigger picture of this team. When Sam Darnold can lean on Kenneth Walker and Zach Charbonnet, the offense does not have to chase points through the air, and that helps protect a defense that has been living through injuries and heavy snap counts. Long, physical drives soften fronts, keep pass rushers honest, and set up play-action shots that make players like Jaxon Smith-Njigba even more dangerous. Yet even with this support, The defense still had to survive a long night against Cam Ward, and a Titans offense that refused to quit, which is where the story now shifts to a beat-up unit full of new names that somehow kept standing tall when it mattered most. The Seattle Seahawks defense just went through the kind of test that exposes weak teams, and instead it showed how deep and tough this group really is. No Ernest Jones, no Tyrus Knight, no Julian Love, long drives by Tennessee, and a fresh rookie quarterback in Cam Ward who refused to back down. That is every defensive coach's nightmare. Yet when big downs showed up, Seattle kept answering. They were on the field for long stretches, took hit after hit, and still forced key stops that kept the game from ever flipping fully toward the Titans. For a unit that has been patched together all year, that is not luck, that is a standard. What nobody expected was how loud the next men up would play. Drake Thomas flew around the field and piled up double-digit tackles like he had been starting for years. Patrick O'Connell came off the practice squad and looked like he had something to prove on every snap, finishing plays in space and even getting home for a sack. Up front, Byron Murphy kept adding to his sack total, Derek Hall finally grabbed his first of the season, and Leonard Williams pushed the pocket with the kind of power that makes quarterbacks hurry throws. Behind them, Nick Emanwari stepped in at safety and delivered steady tackling and clean angles, which is not easy when a mobile rookie like Cam Ward keeps extending plays and testing your discipline. The crazy part is that this group is still putting top-level numbers on the board while grinding through all of that chaos, giving up around 19.7 points per game and sitting near the top of the league in scoring defense. That is not a fluke. That is a sign that the talent and coaching have finally met in the middle. Even with bodies missing, communication misfires, and long nights chasing Cam Ward, they found a way to close the door when it truly mattered. And inside that bigger story, there is one defender whose journey has flipped from doubt to proof in a way nobody saw coming. Because while the front seven held the line, the real shock has been what Riq Woolen has turned into on the outside. The Seattle Seahawks were only a few bad Sundays away from seeing Riq Woolen become nothing more than trade talk, and now he looks like one of the most important players on this defense. Early in the season, he had a rough stretch, including mistakes against San Francisco that got replayed everywhere, and a jump ball against Davante Adams that turned into a touchdown and turned up the noise even more. Fans questioned him, media shows debated his future, and there were real talks about whether Josh Jobe had passed him on the depth chart. For a lot of players, that kind of pressure breaks confidence, but Riq Woolen did something different. He took all of that noise, went quiet, and started fixing his game snap by snap. Once you look at the numbers from both sides of his season, you see just how big that shift really is. Early on, quarterbacks completed 13 of 18 passes when they went at Riq Woolen, which is exactly why trade rumors started flying. Since that Texans game, the story flipped. Now opponents are only 10 of 25 throwing in his direction for just 69 yards and 1 touchdown. And that one score was that contested grab by Davante Adams, where perfect coverage still lost to a perfect catch. On top of that, the PFF lockdown report recently had Riq Woolen sitting right behind Sauce Gardner near the very top of the league in tight coverage rate, which means offenses are either afraid to throw his way or pay for it when they try. That is not a lucky hot streak. That is a corner finally locking into Mike Macdonald's system and trusting his technique. The real impact shows up when you zoom out and see how this changes the whole picture for Seattle. With Riq Woolen playing at this level across from Devin Witherspoon, the Seahawks can call coverages with far more confidence, send extra rushers, and trust that their corners can erase outside options without constant safety help. That makes life easier on the battered linebacker group, lets the pass rush hunt, and sets up a style of defense that travels into cold weather and playoff games. It also turns what once looked like a contract question in 2026 into a player the front office now has every reason to keep. And when you combine that kind of shutdown corner play with an offense that can hang 30 on anyone, the conversation naturally shifts to something even bigger, where this team sits in the NFC race and what happens if they finally learn how to finish opponents without letting anyone crawl back late. The Seattle Seahawks are sitting in a strange spot right now where the numbers say contender but the standings still say hunter, not hunted. 8 victories in the first 11 games usually screams top seed. Yet the Los Angeles Rams sitting at the top of the division keep them locked in that wildcard lane while teams like the Philadelphia Eagles, Chicago Bears, Green Bay Packers, and Tampa Bay Buccaneers crowd the upper half of the NFC table. It is not a comfort zone, it is a pressure cooker. One slip and you can tumble into a messy race, but one strong run and you can flip the whole conference picture in a month. That is the razor edge this team now walks on every single Sunday. When you look at what is coming, The path is clear but not soft. The Minnesota Vikings, the Atlanta Falcons, the Indianapolis Colts, and then that huge showdown at Lumen Field against the Rams sit right in front of them. Beat the teams you are supposed to beat, and suddenly that final clash with Los Angeles turns into a battle for far more than bragging rights. It becomes a door to the top of the division, and maybe to the most important seed in the bracket. The Titans game showed both sides of this team in one night. Explosive scoring that built a huge cushion, then red zone stalls and late conservative calls that let a comfortable lead shrink. That kind of pattern will not survive January football, and deep down, everyone in that locker room knows it. The wild part is that there is nothing mysterious about what turns this group from dangerous into flat-out terrifying. When an offense led by Sam Darnold, Jaxon Smith-Njigba, Kenneth Walker, Zach Charbonnet, Cooper Kupp, and Rashid Shaheed plays with the same urgency in the fourth quarter that it shows in the first, and when a defense featuring Riq Woolen, Devin Witherspoon, Byron Murphy, Leonard Williams, Drake Thomas, and Nick Emenwari gets just a little more rest from cleaner drives, the gap between Seattle and the rest of the NFC starts to widen fast. A first-round bye, home field, cold night playoff games in front of that home crowd, all of it is sitting right there if they learn to slam the door instead of leaving it cracked. And that is the part that makes this team feel like too much. Because the moment they decide to finish opponents instead of letting them breathe, the rest of the conference is going to find out just how small the margin for error is against these Seahawks.